three. I think so. Not a this is right. That's the new model. This is Claire's. They're the Chiefs last night, right?
Okay, I think we're ready to roll.
Forgetting what I made, I'll do it.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It is April 3rd, 2025. We have our colleagues from the transplant team coordination and some of our other providers. So Chad, Emily, and Lauren are going to update us on what's new with transplant. So everybody should be able to see, and you can just advance your slides.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thanks for having us, guys. So last time I was here several years ago, we did like a whole transplant. Oh, thanks. Like we're doing hand motions today. We didn't know, but we're gonna do. So last time we were here, did like an hour-long session on transplant and what a transplant is and how it happens. But today we just had about 20 minutes. So I think we received some questions in an email, just some things to kind of follow up with you guys. So we'll briefly review that, and then of course, if there's any questions, please just interrupt and ask. Raise your hand. This is super free, open conversation, open dialogue. So, so first we want to talk about transplant by volume. I think that's helpful just to frame. If you feel like we've been busier with transplant, it's because we have. So we did 242 kidney transplants in the calendar year of 2024. 49 of those were living donors. The living donation has been about average, so around 50 a year for several years. And then the deceased donor volume, this is a moderately high volume for us. For liver transplant, this is the most livers we've done in many years, 112. Only 2 were living donors. So that program is a little less robust than it has been in the last couple of years. And then kidney pank transplant, we did a total of 5. So that volume has been about stagnant as well, between 5 and 10 typically on average. I think it's important because you guys see these faculty that we introduce some new faces. So in the last 12 to 18 months, we've had a couple of new surgeons join. Dr. Danny Hawkinson came from, she trained in Arizona, came from Yale. She's our surgical director of the kidney transplant program. So if you have questions about how things are going or concerns, she's super approachable. She's very invested in outcomes and making sure people's questions get answered. And if there's concerns, they're addressed. So super welcoming to ideas and thoughts. So if you see her, say hello. Our other surgeons have been here before and have trained here. They left for fellowship, but did their general surgery residency here. Dr. Kyle Sheets and Ben Beasterville. Kyle went to California at UCSF, and then Ben went to Wisconsin, and they're both returning back as full faculty. So they do all of the organs, liver, kidney, pank. They will have some general surgery patients as well. So they should be familiar faces to you. We also have our fellows. So right now we're a 2-fellow organization. So we have a senior fellow and a junior fellow. We get a new one every year. Right now our senior fellow is Tiffany Zenz. She's been here almost 18 months. You've probably seen her around before. And then our junior fellow, Maya Anderson. So she has been training here as well as a general surgery trainee and now a fellow. We have an incoming fellow, August of 25, Dr. Devin Pace, coming from Jefferson. So you'll see new faces in August in terms of the transplant folks. So we talked about new faces. Let's talk about new places. So you guys have been instrumental in a direct to pre-op initiative that we have done in transplant in the last 18 months. It's been huge for us. We personally love it. We hope you do too. And if there's concerns that you want to iron out, we want to do that because it's been really helpful for us. So our goal with the direct to pre-op was to reduce unnecessary admissions and improve hospital capacity. We also wanted to improve and streamline the patient experience and have more efficient resource utilization. And we feel like we've achieved that. Those markers are a little more difficult to measure, like patient experience, but we've measured some metrics in terms of the days you've saved and admission days and bed days, and that's been huge. So it's meeting both a patient priority and an institution priority, it's a win-win for everybody. So I think it's just really important. These are you guys should have received messaging, like a 1-page document about the pre-op, direct to pre-op, but the who is basically any transplant patient. So we've listed all adults, kidney, liver pank. They can be on PD or not on dialysis. If they need hemodialysis, it has to be within the last day, and then they can come here to pre-op. No major medical changes or hospitalizations. That's a question that's asked by the coordinator when they call. They can't be on anticoagulation, and then the OR time is scheduled within 3 hours of their expected arrival. people. This can happen 24/7. So there's certain metrics about who the organ, OPC stands for Organ Procurement Coordinator, will call. And then the patient arrives about 3 hours before their OR. Our goal is to get them back here at least 2 hours before their OR time. That sometimes doesn't happen perfectly. That communication is a little bit less streamlined, I think, in terms of like how we're aware they're here or how we're notified. But the goal is to get them back here and get like critical labs drawn. So with the directive pre-op as of December 3rd, 24, we did 102 cases. So now I'm sure that that graph just continues to go up the curve. We've reduced length of stay by approximately 50% of cases going direct to pre-op. So thank you so much. You guys have been huge in this process. So like I said, I can't thank you enough, and I can't tell you enough that if you have questions or concerns about this, to let us know, because we want to make it better. So now on to some of the questions you guys asked. So one of the questions was how to talk about donor and recipient pair scenarios. So I'm going to try to break that down a little bit. A donor and a recipient in a living transplant can be related or unrelated. Related, think of as like a first degree relative. This is a parent, a sibling, or a child. Unrelated is anything not above. Your second cousin, your friend, your neighbor, your church friend. Those are all unrelated people. Even a cousin that feels directly related is unrelated. They can be directed or non-directed. So you can be unrelated and directly donate. So if you know your friend and they need a kidney transplant, that's a direct donation. You know the recipient, you have a relationship with them. Non-directed would be what we used to call altruistic. They've removed that language because basically anybody that's giving a gift of an organ is considered altruistic, right? Altruism is being exhibited in that behavior regardless of if they know the person or not. So we now call that non-directed. So that would be a stranger. That would be a college student here at U of M saying, I'm 20, I have the decision to donate a kidney and I can do that and I want to do that, but I don't have a recipient in mind. I just feel the call to do that. So that would be a non-directed. That would not be related, right? So you can't be non-directed and related. That would be weird. I don't think I've ever seen that, right? Like that would be like you knowing somebody needed it. No, it can't happen. So that's not a combination. So that's sort of some of the breakdown of those. Any combination, though, can participate in the paired donation program. Okay. So the state in which you have a relationship with the recipient or the donor does not impact your ability to be pooled in this paired program where we match you up with people all around the country. So that can be for various circumstances. Maybe your blood type doesn't match, but you still want to donate. So we put you in the pool of people and find each other a blood match, and we ship the kidney off to another place. Or it could be an age mismatch or some medical, clinical circumstances that dictate that you can't directly donate to the person you want to, but we enter you in the pool. So you could be non-directed and enter a pool. Those are like the chains you hear about on Good Morning America. That 20-year-old from Michigan donated to somebody in Texas who then was part of a pair, and a chain happened and 8 people got the gift of transplant because of one altruistic or non-directed donor, right? So any combination of these things listed can be included in a paired program. Okay. Does that kind of answer that piece? Okay. Living donor transplant, we want to emphasize that the donor and recipient, whether they are non-directed, whether they know each other or not, they all have to come to the hospital at the same time. So they are asked to all arrive at the same time, whether they know each other or don't know each other or in a pair. If their ORs are happening on the same day, they come at the same time. They also are brought back to pre-op at the same time. So it's really important that we see the donor and the recipient both together. The surgeon comes down and makes sure they're both ready to roll before we make any incisions. So they arrive at the same time and they come back to the pre-op area at the same time to begin that day of workup. Okay. Some information on the recipient, some best practices. The potassium is drawn on a recipient on arrival stat. So one of the biggest issues is hyperkalemia. Anesthesia will not provide anesthesia in the setting of hyperkalemia. And elevated potassium is one of the cornerstone problems of a patient with ESRD on dialysis. So maybe they missed dialysis or they didn't have effective dialysis, or some are just hyperkalemic because they try hard, but they still can't clear that K. So that has to be drawn stat on every recipient. That can be a VBG, and then that's drawn in addition to any other labs that are necessary for the day. And then again, the reason for them arriving at the same time is we evaluate the donor and recipient before we make the donor incision. So we do not start an OR on a donor unless we see the whites of the eyes of the recipient and we know they're healthy, well, and ready to proceed. Okay. Thymo. So thymo is a big question mark always. So the reason we obsess about thymo is it's a really expensive drug. So it isn't prepared in advance. It's not sitting back in a bulk in the pharmacy like Versed or like other drugs you might give is or morphine. It's sitting there ready to be compounded and made, but it is not prepared in advance. It's also a weight-based dosing, so we can't just have 100 bags of it in the back waiting on call. So it's ordered not on all living donor recipients. So if you are a first-degree relative, like donating to a child, you may not need thymoglobulin for that recipient. So we carefully think about it. We have a protocol, but we need to communicate with anesthesia and pharmacy to prep that. It's costly, so we don't do it prematurely. And then anesthesia should help take responsibility for that part of the process. So if you have questions around it, they can always reach out to the on-call provider, like, hey, is it indicated? Is it not? You shouldn't be digging into that. Just call the first contact if you have questions on that. Okay. The donor store. So, for a living donor, so let's shift now to donors. You do draw a blood sample. It's called an HLA donor store. This is a required blood sample that donors all have to have that's kept in a repository for 10 years in case the recipient develops a condition that we can track to the donor. This isn't a research sample. This is required by UNO. So you're going to see that as the donor HLA draw. We get dinged if we miss that. So if you have questions on any single lab or don't have tubes to fill or have concerns, call us because when we get audited, we can get dinged for some of these things that seem like minimal things to you or to some people, but they are important in terms of the global transplant, auditing. Okay. So this is one of them. We have to draw it on every living donor that walks through our door before they get an operation. So that's why it's drawn in pre-op holding. Pair donation, Chad, I think you're taking over here soon, but we've done a total since 2009, 219, and a lot of them involve shipment. So importing and exporting. Think of it just like goods and services, if you will. Like it can take a commercial flight. We can bring it in from the outside and you can deliver it out as an export. So Chad is going to roll in on pair donation, I think. Does that sound good?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Any questions so far? Okay, perfect.
I do have
Yeah.
for the donors, or like a
Must be drawn on arrival. The other really key ones that have to be drawn on arrival under the same guidelines are the recipient serologies, hepatitis C, HIV, Hep B. That's a whole panel, and if we miss them, we get dinged. So if you don't have quantity sufficient for those, I also recommend actually labeling your tubes with those labels. So don't just put those in the bag. Like even if you have to draw an extra yellow top or serum separator, put it label on those serologies. That's not a requirement, but I highly encourage it because we've been getting dinged a lot about missing some of those. And they don't notify us before the patient's rolled back, and then we are considered non-compliant with that from a UNOS perspective. So that HLA draw and the donor HLA draw and the recipient serologies are essential. Those are audited. So, yep.
Yeah, and talking about that, we have a UNOS is coming next week for an audit.
Great.
So we had to give them the donor and the recipient charts ahead of time, and they asked for both of those. So we have to pull up the OR documentation of that it was drawn at the correct time.
Yes, and to answer your question, that protocol dictates on arrival for transplant, but before they begin the transplant. So that's why it can't be done the day before. Must be drawn on arrival, but before incision is made. Yeah. So this is really the best place for it to be done. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thanks, Em. All right. So as Emily said, I'm Chad Abbott. I'm one of the living donor coordinators, and I primarily work with the pair donation program. So you can see the total number that we've done. We do about 15 to 20 a year. Originally, we started it internally. Now almost all of them are kidneys coming in or kidneys going out. So if they are internal, and I communicate this to as many people as possible, the surgeons, Satish is primarily my anesthesia contact. I'll talk to Marianne Brandley about it. And then also there's that OR PACU email that I'll send an email to. So I do my best to communicate if these people need to be separated as well as other things. Because if they're internal, then we don't want them in bays next to each other. And it hasn't happened in years, but it did happen once. And it wasn't a big deal, but we prefer that it doesn't happen. We're doing more and more cases with centers in different time zones. We've done some from California. We do a fair amount with Texas. We do a lot with Oshner. So that can always be an issue. So and I think this will continue to happen, that we're going to start more and more cases early because the flights can be an issue. So if you start at 7:30, you may not get a flight until 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and then that kidney's getting there at 10 o'clock. Well, we don't like to start surgeries at 10 o'clock at night. The other centers don't want to either. So I think that we will see more and more of those. They seem to have went pretty smooth lately. Initially, when we did them, we missed a couple of flights because nobody's used to starting at 6 o'clock. I don't think anybody realized this is an issue. We have to get this thing going. Not that they're going to rush the surgery, but you got to get it started on time. So I think those are things that you may see more and more just to make better flights. We do charter kidneys sometimes. Average cost is about 20,000 to charter a kidney. A lot of centers don't want to pay $20,000 extra for the organ. So the majority of these do fly commercial. With the imports obviously are just sent to us. They may do the nephrectomy in the afternoon. We typically will do this with West Coast centers. We did one recently. I think it was with Oshner in Louisiana, but they started the nephrectomy at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, shipped the kidney, put it on pump at Gift of Life, and then Gift of Life delivered it in the morning. So it's a little bit different scenario than you guys are used to or that we're used to. Again, I think it's something that we will see more often. Dr. Hawkinson is kind of a big proponent of this. If it's going to be a late surgery, let's get them to start it late, stick it on a pump, and then we'll just do it first thing in the morning at our normal schedule time with the normal OR staff. So as I said, it goes to Gift of Life, and then I usually have them deliver it here about 6 in the morning. The two that we've done recently, there haven't been any issues, but if you guys notice issues, please let me know. For kids being shipped out, blood is always going to go with the organ. So this is different than the HLA donor store. This blood is sent with the organ in the event that the kidney gets there and there's an issue with the recipient. So now you've got a kidney in another state without a recipient. So what they do is they will match it to a different recipient, but they need the blood to do the cross matching. The order for that is paired kidney transplant specimen draw. I have not noticed any of these being missed recently, so I don't think it's an issue. And the other thing is our perfusion team is aware that they know what needs to go out. So if for some reason it's not drawn, then they should be asking somebody to get it drawn. Ideally, it's in pre-op because it seems like once they get in the OR and if anesthesia has to do it, that's when we run into an issue with getting it done. That's all I have. Any questions on paired donation cases or anything else that we talked about?
I think we were just chatting earlier about, and I know some of our charge nurses were on the Zoom, about patients that are here in the building, but they're not necessarily on call. And so they're waiting out in the lobby and we're not getting them back. So I think we just need to be a little creative of how we can communicate that better. So we're not running into that time crunch of like, you guys are like, oh, we're at that 2 hour, 2.5 hour, 3 hour mark, and they're still not in pre-op. I don't know. There was, they weren't put on call. Yeah. So I don't know if that's something that, I mean, you guys aren't being notified that the patient's here. You're just looking at the status board, basically.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. I
When
don't know if
When they
there's
check into
other,
the front desk and an OR time is within a certain period, what does that prompt them?
that just means that they're physically in the building, but until the OR that they're booked in or the surgeon puts them on call, our charge nurses typically won't bring them back to a pre-op slot.
I think it's.
Yeah, or anesthesia will put them on call. So like if there is if there's a current, OR room in progress and they're to follow, anesthesia will gauge, okay, they're wrapping up the case. I can put the next one on call, or it's going to be about 2 hours, whatever. That's what the process typically is. And maybe they're not doing it as soon as what they should.
Yeah, so in the event that happens, our surgeons will find an OR and a surgeon, so they almost always will make it work. So I think we should eliminate that completely from this. Like they should just be put on call and come back here within 2 or 3 hours of their arrival, because that means an operation is happening. And
Yeah.
we'll find an anesthesiologist and we'll find a surgeon in a room typically. We'll
Yeah.
bump other people or whatever. So maybe I can talk to Dr. Barrett, who spearheaded this, and sort of iron out what that might look like. Because really this process is to say like our surgeon knows they're coming back. And even if Dr. Sheets is on call and doing a case, he'll call Dr. Sung and say, hey, I got a kidney here and I need to start in 2 hours.
Yeah.
That will happen.
Okay.
So I think that's great feedback and I'll get back to you with that in an email.
Okay.
Do you think, Lauren? I mean, that should just be eliminated. They're on call as soon as they arrive in my
Okay.
mind.
We
Yeah.
just probably need to loop in anesthesia. too.
Totally agree. Yep.
So-
Agree. Yeah. So let me talk to Dr. Barrett. We'll speak with her, let her know that concern or piece that's kind of a gap.
The other caveat to this is what we mentioned before is that if we physically don't have a
Yes.
pre-op bay
Yes.
because we're packed,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's somewhat the challenge in the afternoon.
But if they're already on call, you basically would just, as soon as you get a bed, bring them back, right?
Yes.
So the on-call piece, once that's triggered, if you're full, that still allows you as soon as you have an opening to bring them back, right?
Typically, yeah.
So I think the on-call piece is probably the piece that needs
Yeah,
to be.
in my experience, it's that on-call piece that has held things up.
Yeah.
Once that got sorted out, then patients got.
They got back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes these
Anybody
patients
else?
show up like whenever they want. So like I've seen patients show up 5 or 6 hours before the scheduled time. So I think that really the on-call part's the most important part. I've had the OR desk call me at 11 o'clock at night and be like, oh, this is a 4 a.m. kidney. And I'm like, I'm not bringing them back at 11 o'clock at night for a 4 a.m. kidney.
Sorry, Mike, the speaker is not working, but I got what you said. So he's saying
You know, they get
patient might show
excited. They
up.
just show up whenever they want.
when they want, or they're told like, hey, yeah, you're gonna get a kidney tomorrow, whatever, and whatever time they were told to show up, or if they're just arriving because they're nervous, whatever, they come 4 hours early. And like we're like nobody's gonna put them on call. So then they are inconveniently like waiting in the lobby. So that poses an issue too. Like, we don't want them just hanging out and, pacing the lobby and not knowing like what's going on as well. But
If they were to become on call to OR 8 hours before, but you only brought them back here 2 hours before because you realized that piece, what
Yeah.
is the on call to OR prompt other than bringing them back here to a bed? Does it begin any other cascade of events?
not really.
So I would make the argument that we could put them on call as soon as they hit the front desk, and then we need to be cognizant, right? Somebody is aware this patient is going to OR at 4 a.m., but they've been here since midnight.
Yeah.
And within 2 hours of that time, then they need to be brought back to a bed.
Correct.
Is that something that a charge could reasonably?
And that
like,
ultimately
do?
like just has to be communicated.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
the PAC you charge in the evening time, and then early morning our pre-op charge is here at 4:30.
Yeah.
So
Because if the on-call piece is literally just a status, and we have the authority to say when that process of pre-oping begins, if they're on call
Yeah.
for these cases, then, we could, again, consider just making them all on call when they check in, but then you guys decide when, within the 2 hours of the OR, they should come back.
yeah. And I think ultimately that has been happening.
Yeah,
I
I
know
think
in
so
the
too.
early on, like
Mhm.
we had some snags and they were showing up and we're like, well, but they're not going until 7, but they were here at midnight.
Yes.
We're like, what are they gonna do for the next
Yeah.
7 hours?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you guys have any
So
other?
I think part of that too is they're being told at times, particularly for patients that start at like 7:30 in the morning or 6 a.m. start, they're being told to arrive at like 2 in the morning by the coordinators. And then when we go out in the morning to get them, sometimes they can be extremely agitated and annoyed, saying that we were told to get here at 2 in the morning, but you're not coming to get us until 4 a.m. Why were we told this? And they're mad at us when we have nothing to do with it. So is that something that you guys can address with whoever calls them, with, I think it's the coordinators that call them and tell them the times, tell them to get there 3 hours early, because then we're taking the brunt of their frustration. Hey, Trish, I think you guys cut out on your end.
So I guess for them to be early is actually a good thing, but, versus we're trying to bring them into the OR.
But the point is well taken. I agree completely.
Yeah.
And I can see how that could happen and they'd get upset.
And
Yep.
to Garrett's point, he's a night shifter, so he's felt the brunt of that.
Oh,
a lot of
yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
in the
People
recent months.
Are much more unhappy when it's 3 in the morning and they have to wait
Yeah.
versus 3 PM and they
Yeah.
have to wait. So,
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Wait, so what was the response? I missed every single thing that was said.
Basically, Garrett, just, they were just emphasizing that. Sorry, we're having sound issues, staff stat. That if they're coming in, if they're being told at 3 a.m., like they're gonna go back and reiterate to the coordinators, to be a little bit more diligent about arrival times and that if they were told or the patient does arrive at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. and they're not going back, that just to work through and treat them with kindness and diligence of like apologetic, but at the same time, we are also strapped with space and
Totally.
time. So, but I think both parties understand that we can do better with that, and it's a communication piece. Did you get that?
Yeah. So are you guys going to try and communicate back to the coordinators about just telling them to get there just 3 hours early?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That
Thank
is
you.
part of the protocol. Well, it's not a protocol, but it's part of the policy or the recommendation. So we will remind them of that.
You just said,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, the coordinators also, they put in a phone note when they call the patient with the organ offer, and it usually says in there what time they told the patient to get here.
Oh, that's good to
Mm.
know. Yeah.
Which, if you
yeah.
guys are noticing that is completely wrong and they're telling them to get here 6 hours early, like let us know that.
Sure.
Versus if the patient is just doing.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
This is great. Thank you, guys. Obviously it's an ongoing process and we've evolved over the years and appreciate your support and continued communication. So,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll circle back on the OPCs within 3 hours. We'll
Yeah.
remind them and then we'll circle back about the on-call piece too with Dr. Bear. And then I'll message you those pieces so you can disseminate.
Okay, awesome.
Great. Thanks so much.
We
guys.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Appreciate it.
Thank